All right, good evening, everybody. All right, so we're going to do some live Q&A here today. Got some questions that have came in. Some pretty common questions, and I want to make sure that we're getting answers to the questions as we're going along. We're live here on Instagram and on also YouTube. So um, if you do have any questions, we might be able to go over those as well, but just put those into the comments, and I'll see if I can get to those and answer them for you. So I'll go back and forth here on the cameras here, a little bit different. I've got my phone and my computer out here. So one of the first questions that a lot of people are asking, or tend to ask initially when I start to interview or work with somebody, is what's this difference between functional medicine and what I've done so far, like the traditional medicine routes. Typically, they've been through a lot of different things, a lot of different testing, and they have a hard time, or just they're curious about, why doesn't medicine test the way that functional medicine does? And a lot of times, what that comes down to is that medicine and the medical practice is designed to to figure out diagnoses. Do you have something as bad, so bad that you can actually diagnose it? And so they're testing to find clarification of like a medical diagnosis. And what a medical diagnosis is, I mean, it's where your body has gotten to such an extreme level that it may require medicine or a treatment to keep you safe and to keep you stable. So their testing is designed for that. I always call it like a threshold test, that if you're past a certain threshold, now you have a medical diagnosis, and the standard of care there is a lot of times to give you a medication, which is totally fine in those moments because it can really save your life. And I don't have a problem with that. Like, just think of something like a heart attack. If you had a heart attack, I have no problem with you taking medications to stay alive, but that really doesn't have anything to do with your health at that point. It's about keeping you alive, which is important, of course, right? So the testing is designed in the medical side more for that threshold to say, can we confirm a diagnosis here? And is the physiology, is the body so bad that it requires medication at this point? And or does it need some type of therapy or even like a surgery? And so that's what the testing is for, is to clarify if you've hit that type of threshold that you qualify basically for a medical procedure. And that's totally fine, but that medical testing isn't designed to ask why it happened. So that's the bigger part, and that's what functional medicine testing is looking at. Is that in functional medicine, we're looking at these 7 different areas of function within the body. We call them the 7 nodes of function happening within your body. Think of your gut. So that's a big part of a big part of your immune system, your nervous system, your brain, your hormones, your digestive system. So things, enzymes, think barrier functions, like a lot of people have heard of leaky gut these days. So leaky gut's a big one. Mucous membranes, the place that shows us how the body has changed physiologically that led you into a diagnosis. So that's why in functional medicine, a lot of times you hear like that, getting to the cause, testing for the cause, because it is an upstream level of testing that's not necessarily for diagnosis. You can diagnose from functional medicine testing, but that's not like it doesn't fit within the medical standard of care. And then I think that brings us to another good point, really, about medical testing, is that it is designed around the framework of insurance companies, and then also pharmaceutical companies. Okay, and so it makes total sense. Organization within our medical system that says, do you qualify for a certain procedure or medication? And we need that. But then that's also what the insurance model based off of that. If you really haven't hit that in a way. And so in functional medicine, there is a lot of testing that's not covered by insurance because of that. And I didn't make up those rules or that understanding, or those policies and procedures. But I also come from a philosophy too, that who is responsible for your health? You are. So ultimately, you have to take care of it. It's not an insurance company's job. And what in clinical practice is that the insurance is designed to cover things that are more like what I call look good, feel good type symptoms that if you look good and feel good, then you don't necessarily get the coverage from the insurance companies. I think just the nuts and bolts and the bottom line of as I'm tailing off into that topic is that ultimately you're responsible for your health and you're responsible for the things that you put in and around and on your body that can stress your body enough and ultimately produce or degenerate you or advance you to a medical diagnosis. And so again, to answer that question is what was the question? Is that why does medicine test a certain way and why does functional medicine test a certain way? It's actually for very different purposes. Medical is for diagnosis, and if you've hit a medical threshold, getting the proper treatments, the clinical necessities that you may need in those moments to be safe and stable. But then you got to realize and understand that there's this whole functional medicine model of testing that's looking upstream to ask what has caused your body to change so much that you've hit a medical diagnosis, and then what are all of those other factors that are driving that medical diagnosis to show up. And what I mean by that is that there's three stressors that your body has to adapt to: physical, chemical, and emotional. So if you don't know what those are and you haven't tested for those, then those are these drivers that cause your body to adapt and change. And when your body's adapted and changed enough, the cells, tissues, organs can degenerate enough that now you have a medical diagnosis. Okay, so there's a clear pattern to that, and a lot of people are just trying to get clarity and are curious why there's a difference. And I get it. I did too. I did too. My wife got very sick in 2014, and I was already a doctor at the time, and she got really sick, and we didn't know what to do, and I didn't know about functional medicine either. And so ultimately, that's what led me to functional medicine. Is her story of she had a ton of different symptoms, but ultimately it came down to immune system, gut dysfunction, and a big part of her problem was mold toxicity. And it was just such a big thing that stood out for us that conversation would have never happened in a medical model. That the cause of the problem would be mold toxicity. I still run into doctors who say that that's not a thing, and I'm like, well, I mean, I guess you better read some more research and dig into it a little bit more because it's clearly part of the problem of immune system dysfunction. So anyways, that was the first question. I think another big question. Well, let me look here. So the next question was, you know, um, yeah, it kind of tails off. The next question was about if if functional medicine is looking at these factors of physical, chemical, and emotional stressors. I mean, what does that really mean? And 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 I think a truth that I always teach everybody, and I do a lot of speaking, that I'm always teaching everybody that the body's adapting perfectly to its environment. And in that adaptation, it's doing it to protect you. Your body's genetically programmed to protect you, not to damage you. Okay. But we need an example to help that make sense. And my favorite example in that scenario to explain these scenarios is like if you're stuck in a very cold environment, I would say, like, if you're stuck on an iceberg and it's very cold, you don't have the right equipment on, your body's going to take all the blood nutrients from your fingers and toes, your extremities, and bring it to where your vital organs to do what? Protect you and keep you alive. That's a survival mechanism in the body. It's trying to protect you, and it doesn't discriminate between an iceberg, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, depression, anxiety. These symptoms, these diagnoses are all the result of your body being stressed, not the cause of your body being stressed. And so that's a clear distinction that has to take place. And so, if you look at this iceberg analogy, the body's adapting perfectly to its environment, and the environment is stressing the body. So the body's just trying to survive, is trying to protect. In that mechanism, is trying to protect the most vital things. Fingers are not as important as your brain. They're not as important as your heart, right? So it's trying to protect the most vital things. If you stay on that iceberg, you're going to continue to freeze, and the fingers and toes can literally they can literally freeze and die. And none of that is your body doing the wrong thing. It's that you're still stuck in a poor environment that's causing your body to adapt, stressing it, causing it to adapt and eventually causing tissue damage that you can diagnose something there, right? You can name that frostbite, right? You can just call it that, right? You have frostbite. Now you have apoptosis of cells, cell death, right? So it's like at that point, you can finally get the diagnosis, but the diagnosis, again, is not the cause of the problem. It's the result of you being stuck on an iceberg. And it's not your body doing the wrong thing. See, it looks very destructive. It's painful. It is not good, right? But it was still a protective mechanism that your body was just trying to adapt to its environment. And it can only last so long, right? It can only take so much stress before those tissues degenerate, break down, organ cells and tissues start to um, they degenerate. That's the technical term. I always call it like it's growing cavities. Just to say keep it simple, right? The fingers are growing cavities. They're degenerating. They're dying, not because your body's working against you. It's actually working for you, and that applies to every diagnosis, symptom, problem you've ever heard of, guys. And I think that been very profound to put that into perspective for people. And I also think it brings people back a lot of hope that even though they've been through so many different things, because I mean truth is most people who come that I help have been through everything else, and it's kind of like a process of elimination where they're checking off boxes and then finally they're like, oh my gosh, where was this 10 years ago? And we were the same way, me and my wife, and it was like, wow, this is very profound. Why isn't this like more mainstream? And I think that there's a lot of different reasons for that. Whether we're looking at, medical industry is very strong, they're very powerful. That you know we as human beings really wait until we really have significant problems, until unfortunately we try to do something about it, and then we try to treat it with the medications and different therapies. And what a lot of people that I help, they say is just they're like, I finally realized that that's not getting to the cause of the problem. It's just managing my symptoms, and that because I'm not getting to the cause, the problem's still progressing. And I'm like, yeah, that's 100% truth. But see, they came to that reality on their own, and in some ways, how great is that, right? Because this clarity is so much power, and that's what I really love about it. I'm an analysis guy. I really want to understand the details because even with my wife, we had some doctors throwing out some generalities, even in the healthcare, in the actual health world, that well, it could be this and could be that. Just take these supplements. Even doing some things like muscle testing, and I don't mind muscle testing. However, it's not good enough in my book. It's not good enough in my book because there's all of this functional medicine testing that's available, okay, and it's to the highest standards. It shows us all the details on the inside that you may not feel or understand is there, and so it's black and white in a way. It's like what's in there, what's not in there, what's producing these symptoms, problems, and conditions. And it really comes back around to the three stressors of physical, chemical, and emotional, right? So this iceberg analogy is a physical stress, but once you get that degeneration within the tissues, that also is a physical stress because those tissues are not as strong. They're not as, they're broken down. They're not what they were designed and created to be at that point. Just like a cavity on a tooth, right? Like that enamel, that tooth isn't exactly perfect anymore. And what you got to do is you got to stop that process by getting to the cause so it doesn't continue to degenerate, and then allow it and do the things necessary to regenerate it. And a lot of the things necessary to regenerate it is to get off the iceberg, right? Stop making your body adapt. And that's what a lot of the testing shows us too, is what are the stressors that we can remove. And of course, food is definitely a stressor for people, but I think we spend too much time on whether we eat fast food or not, cheat meals, all the different types of diets out there. And really we need to look more at the stress response. And that's really what another question was, is like, a lot of people are curious about nutrition and it's important. And what's the best programs and stuff. And I mean, the thing is that they all are, there's a lot of are great. But none of them are individualized, right? So you have to understand that each person's an individual. And so if you're not getting to the individuality of it through testing, then it's still a generalization. And if you're still being general, you're leaving what I would say your greatest asset, your health, you're leaving it vulnerable to degenerate more, to advance to worse issues because you still don't know how you're on an iceberg and how to get off. See, because when you get off the iceberg, your body automatically warms back up, right? So So when you stop stressing your body, it automatically warms back up. And the stress response is something that I talk about all the time. And it's not just the emotional, because I think that that's where our brains go most of the time, is that, oh, stress, that's emotional stress, work, finances, relationships, those things, right? And that is one of them. However, there's two other: chemical and physical stress, and they're all working together. There are three different things. There are three different types of stressors that are all working together, meaning that they're all affecting the body simultaneously together, and you have to know how to dissect those. And but when you're talking about physical stress, it is the traumas, it is the degeneration of the tissues that break down organs and cells, and then they become dysfunctional, and so that's a physical stress that your body has to cover for. The chemical stressors, I mean, you could call food chemical stress. Definitely the fast foods, but there's so many different topics here. Um, to keep it simple and short here tonight, I mean, it's just a matter of, like, you got to understand that you've got to be detailed, you got to be individualized when it comes to nutrition. And one of my favorite things to do is actually test food antigens. Okay, food antigens. An antigen is a toxin or a foreign substance that induces the immune system response, and especially the production of antibodies. That's the definition of it. And so I do food antigen testing. Most people heard of that as food allergy or food sensitivity testing. No matter what, guys, on that test, you're still looking for antigens. And so, you got to get that tested properly. That needs to be done through the blood, through specific labs. There are some companies that you can get and purchase online, not needing a doctor, and those are always suboptimal. Okay, they're not as good as the doctor recommended ones. So, but that's something that really breaks through the nutrition barriers. That, should I eat paleo? Should I do keto? Right? Like, there's all of these questions, and then I just like to start with number one. Like, well, let's take out the obvious things, like the soda, the artificial sweeteners, the colorings. I would even go towards the gluten and the dairy, and the sugar. Right? Those are things that you got to remove to get off the iceberg for sure. I mean, those are what we call lifestyle factors. But then a deeper, more specific level is getting into food antigen testing. And it's not just about foods, it's not just about the gut and digestion. Those foods that show up on an antigen test are triggers that trigger your stress response, which causes a whole ripple effect to your immune system, your hormones, your neurotransmitters. Like, it just causes this whole ripple effect. And so, that's how food is really important. But I would say it's not as important as also understanding how has tissues changed, how have tissues degenerated that are physical problems, but then how does everything fit together? Think of it like a puzzle, that if you just had a few pieces of the puzzle, you still don't have a clear picture of what that puzzle is. And so again, you're leaving your health vulnerable. Okay. And so we don't want to do that. All right. So let's see here. Just waving there. All right. If you're coming, if somebody's new coming on here and you have any questions, just let me know. You can type you can type into the comments. I will be reviewing and coming back to these videos, and answering any questions. So even if we're not live anymore, you can definitely ask some questions in the comments below. I think we're about 18 minutes, 19 minutes into this. We'll start to sum this up a little bit. Just answering a couple different questions that have came in. The difference between functional testing versus medical testing. We're also looking at, there's, what causes the body to change? What's this adaptation thing, and what are the stressors, and start to get an idea of that a little bit. Also give some opportunity for anybody to ask some questions. I want to be doing these every week. Okay. I'm looking for Wednesdays. I'm going to see how this time works. We may do it in the morning, but either way, we're going to start to do a Q&A session every week. And what we're also doing is we're progressing this into podcasts. We're going to be launching a podcast here in the near future, and then also, so I want a lot of communication back and forth. We have when I mean we, I really mean my wife and I. My wife Victoria. Go to our, if you're on. Well, I guess on both platforms that we're on right now. I mean, you can see our story. We produced a really nice video to tell our story, because it's always been the reason why we went into functional medicine, and my wife's a nutritionist too. That why we went into functional medicine, why we're so passionate about it, is because of her story and her sickness and us overcoming that. Like it's one of those profound moments for us in our lives, and we're humbled that we've been able to help a lot of people. Okay, and have I would say a unique perspective on it, because it's one thing to read this stuff in the book and study it and know physiology, but it's a whole nother thing to have lived it. Because I think when I'm working and consulting with people, the perspectives that I help people with, help them gain to feel certain, to get to the certainty to knowing and doing, really a coaching aspect. It's a lot of it's come because of the trials and the hardships and the difficulties that we went through that led us to truths about life, about body, about our mind, about process, and how everything fits together. And that's always been my like skill, like ever since then, is just like to be able to gain clarity, even when people have been to like through the most advanced technical testing hospitals, and bring it all together. And believe me, I'm very humbled by that. And but it's one of those things that's your calling, it's your passion. This is not a job for us at all. And that's why I want to do this. So that's my point of saying this, is that's why I want to do the Q&As. I want to get out there and serve and help more people. I want to make a bigger difference. And our practice is completely online, and so that allows us an opportunity to do that. So but anyways, coming back around, we will be doing more, throwing more information out there. We will be hosting more Q&As. I'm looking for Wednesdays probably to do Q&As. um, Periodically, I'm also doing what I call my Road to Wellness talk, and that's a live webinar masterclass about understanding how, like, getting into more depth about how all of this fits together, from functional medicine to traditional medicine approaches, looking at testing at labs at different examples. What is health? How does the body's physiology, how is it working with us and not against us? Like it's this whole masterclass of what I like to say of you becoming your own doctor. Okay, that you're responsible for your health, so you have to understand how to become your own doctor and have a better feel about the choices and the things that you need to do to avoid the physical, chemical, emotional stressors, to allow your body to adapt back towards normal, and know what that roller coaster sometimes looks like, or that road to wellness looks like. And so that's why I call it the road to wellness. But it is truly a master class. But I do that every month for sure. But we are, let's give a heads up, we are doing that next Thursday, or excuse me, next Wednesday, the 12th, April 12th, at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I am in Colorado, so Mountain Standard Time, and it was 6 o'clock. And so, if you go to my posts there, I have a post about that talk coming up as well. I'll put it in, I can put it in the comments here below, just because I'm talking about it. But that's a little bit of housekeeping. That's a little bit of things that are coming down the pipeline. Trying to make a bigger impact and help more people, get out to the digital world a little bit more, be helpful, get out and give some true information, help to gain clarity, and create relationships with people out there. So yeah, if you have any questions, we look at watching this video post live, just put them in the comments below. Plan on looking out for these Q&As on Wednesdays. I haven't necessarily nailed down exact time. Today we did it at 5 Mountain Standard Time. We'll see how that works out with the schedules in my schedule. But we'll go from there. But I am planning for Wednesdays, and then the future podcasts will be looking to probably be released on Thursdays. So and that will be a lot more in-depth stuff, that I've realized that people, they can watch YouTube or watch an Instagram, but a lot of people that I help too are in the gym, right? Or they're doing stuff. I have a lot of busy moms, a lot of type A moms out there, and they're always doing stuff. And I realize, I'm like, okay, we need a podcast, so they don't have to be watching a video and they can just listen, because they're trying to multitask, which I'm not always the biggest fan of, because I try to stay on point on one thing at a time. I feel like you get things done faster and more complete with that. But that's a whole topic in itself. Maybe we'll just throw that into a podcast too. Anyways, just let me know if you have any questions. Hope to see you guys. Look out for this Q&A next Wednesday. And I'll look forward to chatting with you and talking with you soon. Have a great night.